doors.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, and I think we're going to get started, so please take your seats. Welcome to 2020. Paul, get started with the roll call.
Is that 2020 the television show?
Yeah.
Okay, we have Dave Edron, Finn Evans, Ray Bilbot, Jeff Randall, Jerry Carbone, Jim Carter, and Karen Gilmartin present for the full quorum.
Great, thank you very much. And proof of notice.
Yes, that's what's posted as statute.
Let's move it up to the board for a review of the minutes. The only comment I had was on page 2, just a typo under foundation. Manager's report, second paragraph, second sentence, fourth word from the right, do should be to. D-O should be to, T-O. Any other comments about the content?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
I will forego a president's report, in that it's been quiet, but there will be time later on, and since it's the beginning of a new year and the ending of 2019, it's time for our treasurer to give us a review of our financials.
Wow, I've never gotten on this fast. Okay, let's do it.
Quick in, quick out.
Click in, click out, quick in, quick out. The last couple of meetings I said we're doing fine. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the financials, so I have to spend some time this morning or this afternoon because we have the financials done. I'll give you a quick summary. Good year. Ended up with more money at the bottom line than we had in the budget. We had some extra money to do some extra stuff around the community, and we were able to use some operating money from that. I'm going to give more than a verbal report. I'm going to give a written report, although it says verbal. All these reports, as most of you know, appear for your pleasure on the website, and I guess with that little machine there, you get to watch us do it again if you would like. So I'm going to move through things. There's some interesting numbers that came out of the financials, and I'll spend a little more time with those. So the first one is the key balance sheet items. The operating fund regular in, if you add regular and Comcast together, we're talking about $600,000 of cash, $596. If you look at the reserve fund, those are the reserve and capital fund are the also the interesting ones. We, as a result of moving from resales, the income to operations from resales straight into reserves, we were able to build up our reserves. We spent about $107,000 on projects in reserves. We put 342 in, so we still netted out a gain of 300 in our reserve account. Capital account, we put in 114 of resale monies, spent 200,000, and that included the 120 or 130 something for the pickleball courts, but we of course had some other expenses. So a good year. We're ahead in dollars, but our cash position is pretty strong. So the balance sheet, if you want to look at a more traditional balance sheet, a couple of items that you might have a question is what are prepaid expenses. Our insurance for the year comes due in December, so we pay for all of 2020's insurance in 2019. That's the bulk of the prepaid expense. If you look at the prepaid income, two things. One is, believe it or not, there are people that actually have already paid 2020's assessment in 2019. Of course, we love these people, wish there were more, but there are a number of them. And it's mostly from the single-family homes as opposed to the condo or HOA associations. Also, people that buy the coupons for massages and things like that, that becomes a prepaid. So if you look down, we talked a little bit about the operating fund. We talked about Comcast again, and just simply the point, because we got a 1 month's credit in Comcast this year, we did not use all of the fund balance that we had planned, so we rolled it in, and we will spread that 211 over 2 years, 2020 and 2021. So to put it another way, for the next 2 years, we will continue to subsidize your Comcast bill. And then in 2022, you're going to have to pick up, if I'm right, I think it's only about $5 a month, but don't hold me to that. I know at least one of our finance committee members is here, so if he shakes his head the wrong way, I figure I probably blew it. Okay, operating statement. A couple of points again here. If we look at the variances, the question is always, how did we do against budget? And if we did better or worse, why? If you look at the other administrative revenues, one really nice benefit that wasn't in the plan was a substantial increase in interest income from investments. You recall last year we switched from a number of banks to consolidate everything in Iberia Bank, and they are very good and have a lot of experience working with HOAs and condos. In fact, do a number of the associations in Pelican Marsh besides ours, and they helped us with a much better approach to the way we were putting our money into CDs, and the net result was a substantial increase over budget. In addition, and I'll spend a little more time with this, we had an excellent year with resales, and that rolls over at two ways. One is we get operating revenue from lease applications, and we also had some increases in room rentals, so that's where the other administrative revenue comes. If you look at the building maintenance and utilities, you might say, whoops, a little bit of a problem, but in reality, two things. One is, you might recall when Jeff was doing all of his preliminary work on possible locations for pickleball, we had hired an engineering firm called Grady Minor. So there are some extra costs from that were ahead of budget in there. But in addition, because we had the potential for some pretty substantial positive surplus at the end of the year, we took advantage of that, and a couple of the projects, for example, the basketball court in the back, and the drainage program for tennis, we did ahead of schedule in 2019 rather than waiting until 2020. So though there is a variance, it was a planned variance, and the board had approved the expenditure of the funds, and then we chose to use those funds. When you look at cost center variances, what you're basically seeing is the cost center revenue variance means a lot more activity, and with that activity there are related costs. So if you take one versus the other, the net is actually a positive variance in cost center. The other variance of significance, the cable, again, if you look at the 68 of negative and the 69 of positive. That is that switch between they're giving us credit, so it cost us less. We had already collected the budgeted amount, so we just took less of the reserve from capital, or from cable, excuse me. So the net is really small. The bottom line of all of this, that, and the other thing, as some people say, is that we've added an additional $20,000 to our operating surplus. Now I'd like to take a couple of slides and talk to you a little bit about resale fees. And you know what I think I'd like to do, Paul? Let's go to the next one first. Let me show them the history, and then we'll come back to this page. We tend to budget 100,000 net resales a year. And in the past,
100.
100, what did I say? 100,000. We could only wish. 100 resales.
Are you drinking?
If I looked at, as I said, one of
He likes big
the
numbers.
finance committee members is there, he probably just had a heart attack. 100,000 is not the right number. 1,000 is not the right number, so let's stick with 100 and hope I can get it out. We budget 100, thank you, 100 resales a year, and 100 resales at $4,000 means our budget for income from resales is $400,000 a year. If you look at 16 and 17, incorporated in those numbers were people that lived in Pelican Marsh and sold their home and bought another one, and we charged them $4,000. In the end of 17, effective for 18, we said that doesn't seem fair, because the concept of resale is you're buying into the foundation. And so if you've bought into the foundation, you're just moving, you shouldn't have to pay. Now, there were a few of us on the board that would have liked that to have occurred a few years earlier, but so be it. So in 2018, you'll see we had a total of 116 resales, but 9 of them were internal, so we did not charge.
I see the difference.
Whoa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's 9.
I'm sorry. All right,
You
let
want
me
to sit
start
over
over.
here?
You can see how long I've had to
You want to
look
drink
at
more
that page.
water?
Yeah, 107 is the total number. Oh, God. And the refunds are 9, so the net sales are 98. We budget 100 normally. Now, if I can get 19, we'll be okay. We had 126 resales, of which 12 were refunds, for a net resale of 114. Now, did I finally get it right?
Yep. No, Joy, you got it right.
Thank you. If at first you don't succeed, turn it over to someone else. Okay, so what does it mean in terms of the dollars? The dollars you can see for total collected. Now I'd like to go back and see if I can make a mess of the page before it. Okay. So saying once again, 126 total resales. That's a record as far as I'm aware for activity. And even the 114 of net after refunds is pretty strong. Now, there's someone in the audience that needs to keep in mind what we're doing. That is, we have Paige, I'm going to mess up your last name, Giannetti?
Perfect.
Oh, thank God. Paige has been newly given the responsibility to put together a long-range planning committee. And these are the kinds of things that we're trying to better understand. What is it that attracted 114 people into our community? What could we do to attract more people? And what are other communities doing? Because we're in competition with a lot of different communities. So these numbers become important, and I think it's a very positive result to have 114 brand-new people in our community, which means every 5 years we've got a quarter of the people in this community are new. So another reason to spend some real time on long-range planning.
Okay. Now, I also think it's of equal noteworthiness that 12 residents decided to buy again in Pelican Marsh. And it'd be interesting to understand some of the
Why they stayed?
the logic that they used to execute that decision to stay in Pelican Marsh. Obviously, they like something.
Good point. So what does this all mean? What it means is we picked up an additional $56,000 from our budget on resales, and since the money for resales goes into reserves and capital, that means we picked up an additional $56,000 over our budgeted $400. A very solid financial year. So in summary, we spent some extra monies because we did better than we planned. As a result of the end of the year, we still feel confident that the budget that we put together for the current year that we are in is a comfortable budget, and I look forward to working with the finance team again. They do a great job working with that group, Paul and Jim, our accountant, and I thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions?
Yeah.
Please.
What is the requirement, okay, for what we're supposed to have in reserves based on our study that we have listed? In other words, there is a required amount that we do every year.
Yes.
What is that number for this year that we're supposed to have in the
I
account?
I'm not sure, I can't give you the number off the top of my head. We are over that requirement every year. So, but what that number is depends on, do you have a spreadsheet, Paul?
I can tell you the recent reserve study stated that with the current assets that we need to fund each year to maintain and make those changes, it comes out right now to $196,000 per year that we need to fund the reserves in order to maintain the balances needed.
So we're over that amount because we're looking at 300,980 versus basically 200 that's required.
We're over the minimum, yes. But that number varies through time. It depends, it always has to be greater than the expenditure. So if you go out over time and we have chunks of big expenditure years, we need to make sure we fund it up so that we will always be positive at the end of the year. But you get a multiple year projection, Jerry, during the budgeting process, but I don't keep those numbers in my head.
But the biggest item that comes up in that program is roof replacement. Okay. All of the other items, well, they might be a little larger than normal. Largest air conditioning unit right is basically a $30,000 unit. Okay, for the A-line unit that's up there. But the other large number is roof replacement.
Well, we talked about the fact that 2 years down the road, we need to go back and relook at this distribution of resales, because if we kept doing what we will have done for 2 or 3 years here, which is moving all of our operating monies, we'll end up with one hell of a balance. Yes. I'm sure that's where you're going with it.
Right, because we continually void what's in the docs. Okay.
No, we
don't.
We follow the documents. That's not a correct
Follow the
statement.
documents, okay, but then you say you have the ability to make that transfer internally.
That's because the documents say that.
The documents still, look,
We pointed that out to you.
we went to the owners told us what to do with the money. Okay? That's what the approval base was, from what the owners wanted, not what the board interpreted. Okay?
Can I make a recommendation? Can't we do next year, next month rather?
The month.
No, go ahead.
Thought the mic was on. Mic on? Mic's on. Get the slide for the pool reserve
Sure.
and show that to the members so they can see how the reserves are scheduled for the next 10 years, whatever you want.
Well, we probably
And what is, and that's a rolling thing, because that can change from year to year. But you can never go below, when you see that slide, you can't go below 0 in any year.
No.
So you've always got to have money in there. So if we can show that to the members next month.
I'd be most happy to do that.
And is there a special reason we created this line item now that says cost center, as opposed to what we used to do before when we had administrative, tennis, and...
Only for the sake of summary today. We'll continue to do that. Because we're putting so much information, we just squeeze it into one line item.
Because what I see is the net for cost centers overall.
Right.
Well, it's a small deficit, that's all. On one side, expense. Subterfuge continues.
Other questions from the board regarding the report? Why don't I pause now and see if there's any from the floor? Okay, seeing none, Paul, can we proceed with the manager's report, please?
So now that season is ramping up and we're getting into full swing, we want to remind everyone that, one, many more residents are out now biking, walking, and are jogging throughout the community. So when you're driving, please make sure that you and your guests are following the speed limit and coming to full stops at all the stop signs. This time of year, parking spaces are at a premium, especially in the mornings. So when you're parking your car, please make sure that you're staying within the parking space lines, leaving enough room in the adjacent parking spaces for others to park. As mentioned earlier, the construction of the basketball court that's been going on is scheduled to resume tomorrow now that the concrete surface has properly cured, and hopefully the court should be ready for play within the next 2 weeks. It's really important this time of year when we remember that it's important that we know how many members are using the facility and when they're using the facility here at the foundation, so we can better manage with proper staffing and planning of events so we do not overload the facility in high demand periods. Also having accurate usage of information of who's using the community and when will help the long-range planning committee better to assess and recommend what the future needs of the community are. From doing some random head counts of members participating in recent events throughout the campus in the past few weeks, and then we compare those numbers to the numbers of our check-in in the database, we're only getting about, at best, 40 to 50% compliance of members checking in when they come to the community center. We need help in getting everyone to check in and getting this compliance much closer to 100% to have accurate usage data for the community center. So we're asking you to appreciate those group leaders out there of tennis and bocce, the card games, and other activities to help us with reminding their team members in their groups to check in to help better this compliance. We also plan to send out follow-up emails over the next few weeks to remind residents of the importance of checking in and how this accurate data will help benefit them and the community moving forward. Lastly, during the busy time of the year, as we're in now, the staff always appreciates everyone's patience as we do our best to assist everyone in signing up for events and other programs that are offered by the foundation. That's my report.
Thank you, Paul. I want to make a comment about the first thing you said. I actually had notes on this for myself that I wanted to share. We have been cautioning people about driving behaviors and other things for months now. And I can't remember if it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I think it was New Year's Day. I was in bed early, so it wasn't, there wasn't an effect factor here. But I went for my 5-mile walk. I started out and I'm walking down Bay Laurel going north, and a car comes tearing around the corner from Pelican Marsh Boulevard, happened to go at least 50, and hit the brakes really hard at the stop sign by Troon Lakes. And they're going by and going like this, and the woman's looking at me like, what? It's just terrible. It's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. So I continue my walk. I get to the end, all the way to 41. I hit the gate, I turn around, and all of a sudden, I heard all this noise. Man, did I knock the gate down with my hand or something? Car went right through the metal gate, kept driving, never even stopped. It went right through. So then I'm getting back to the intersection where Savannah and Golf Club Drive is, Marsh Run, whatever they call that, and here comes a car. They may have braked, but they probably braked from 30 to 20, never stopped, just turned right to the country club or wherever they were going. That was one day. Oh no, there was one more. It was within 24 hours. I'm coming in the Galleria entrance. And there's two cars in front of me. The first one goes through, and the second one drives right into the gate and breaks the gate, the metal gate. Now that person stopped. That person was conscientious, but you know, honestly, if people are doing that, I mean, well, if you think it's dangerous walking on the sidewalks, as somebody said, it's rough out there. So to the degree you see something, and I have to admit, I should have taken the license numbers down. You know, I should have spoken to my phone or something. I didn't have my paper, it was about a 5-mile walk. But if you see something like that, don't hesitate to be a good citizen and report it. So, just wanted to mention that. Thank you. Any other comments on Paul's report?
Yeah, go ahead.
Question, or go ahead.
We talked about parking. We talked about parking, and we made the improvements that we made, you know, last year. Have we looked at what the morning situation is so far this month?
Good
Are
question.
we a little bit better off, or
We've
how many
been monitoring-
spaces are we using? Are we using them all, or we got some voids?
Well,
We have to ascertain whether or not we met the objective of relieving the parking situation.
He'll tell you,
we've been taking data every morning, especially starting at 8:30 and 9, and in half an hour intervals, seeing the parking out there and how full it is. And surprisingly, for the first couple weeks in January, we've never had this time we found where we had no spots and we saw cars circling around. So some of the things we've done maybe with the moving the classes further apart, and the guests will maybe contributing to that positively. We also think, and I'm talking to Patrick and Johan, that we may think that we haven't got our full rush of residents down yet, that is still up north, because a lot of classes that we typically see people here already have not returned yet. So combination of the two possibly may be causing that issue.
Well, historically, March is our busiest month here.
Right.
Okay, so I think if we can evaluate what we do, okay, with regard to usage of the parking lot in January, then February, and then March, to see, you know, how big the problem is, because the parking issue relates to anything that you want to add, okay, as an additional activity or use for this facility. There's no sense going out and saying, hey, we're going to have this kind of an activity and make the problem that much greater. There's no sense to that. So that's what we should be watching for. If we're in a good position, okay, then we can make the ads, okay, with relative ease. All right, but I think we need to make sure we got a good tracking of the use.
We're going to keep those monitoring and keeping that data through March, so you have a full.
Yeah, Easter comes late this year. You might want to think about going into the middle of April.
Good point.
I mean, it's obvious that we'll probably have at least 2 days where we're over capacity. Year-end party, the tennis pro event, you know, that's understandable.
Those are one-time shots at
Right.
night most of the time.
But I think that's good. And somewhat related to that, there was a lament by some residents about, oh, we need to have many more bike stands because, you know, everyone's going to be riding their bikes. And we'll get them if they show up, but it hasn't been a problem.
Is Lynn going to give a presentation on anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. I noticed that we did send a notice out today that didn't get caught in the spam, that the suites B and C are going to be closed for an activity later on.
So,
Apparently the other day, all of the suites were closed for an activity that was going to be held at night. Okay, and it put everybody who plays cards or mahjong or anything else 6 ways from Sunday. They had no previous notice. But I think we've got to schedule what's going to happen here at night that doesn't affect the people that are here during the day. All right? Because the other aspect of it is you got something going on at 7 o'clock here at night, all right, cutting off the use of the facility at 1 o'clock in A, B, or C. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Because I don't know what we do here. Most of what we do here at night for the night affairs are rearranging chairs and tables. Okay? So if we have to, we ought to hire somebody to come in so that we can make that change and move those tables and chairs around at 4 o'clock for a 7 o'clock event. But to cut off the people that are playing mahjong cards, okay, for something that's going to happen at 7 o'clock at night is not fair to the other residents. It's as simple as that.
before 4 o'clock, I could probably sympathize with that position, but sometimes, depending on what the venue is, there may need to be sound checks and so
Yeah,
forth, so you need a little
there's some
time.
of that, yeah, but 90% of the time, you don't have that much, okay? And 3 hours to prepare.
And I'm not, do you know what the event is? It's,
The only event I can think of that happened recently, we had, I think it was game night or trivia. And yes, we do need time because once we set the tables up, which is pretty fast, Lynn needs time to come in and decorate the tables and put their proper paperwork. So, but I thought that day, even though we did notify all suites to be closed, we did end up opening Suite A to allow them to use for most of the day. But it's a good point Jerry made, and I'll make sure I talk to Lynn about looking for that in the future.
Because apparently Mahjong and Canasta and Bridge and whatever other card game is, they don't get along for some reason. I don't know what it is, but it seems to be everybody's got their turf, and when you take it away, you've got open insurrection.
It's the 21st, it's in the
Huh?
future.
oh, okay.
It's something we should be able to
The
avoid
event,
rather
do you
easily.
know what the upcoming event is on the 21st?
Is that
Closing down the 2 o'clock?
Florida residency.
Oh, okay.
Did you hear that?
No.
It's the
Florida
Florida residency, and a lot of people have signed up,
For owners,
more than they thought, so they had to close an extra.
Oh, good.
Suite.
Yeah, speaking of that, I think I talked
I think
to
that's a Tuesday, the 21st.
Yes.
I talked to Paul about that, I talked to Lynn about it. We used to have, in the past, we've had candidates nights here. And I don't know if you're aware, we got 6 candidates that are going to be running for the congressional seat that Rooney is leaving.
9.
9 now? Oh, okay. Anyway, I think it would behoove us, because a lot of the people that are here are Florida voters. Even though they don't spend 100% of the time here, they do vote here. And it would be nice to have a candidates night here, to have these guys come in and pitch their wares. And I would suggest the first week in March. Jim?
Yes.
First week of March is also our own candidates night, isn't it, on the 5th? If we have more than 2 candidates for the 2 open positions, I believe it's 5th of March, so we definitely don't want to go off on that one.
Well, anyway, I just threw that out, but I think we ought to have a candidates night for this congressional seat and find out who these guys are.
Other board member comments about Paul's manager reports?
Quick question, Paul. I think you have straightened out the electronics on the fitness center because I think part of the reason we weren't getting the counts we might like to get is because of the handicap situation, people leaving the door open, so nobody had to swipe their card to go in. And I understand you have now gotten that corrected or pretty much corrected.
Well, in the process, unfortunately, the reader for the gym door requires you to swipe through a reader. And there's a few residents with their situation, they have a hard time doing that. However, they have a replacement scanner in progress. It's in the testing out now, but hopefully will be ready soon. Just much like the readers at the front desk, we just hold it at the front and it'll scan it without the swipe. So we're hoping that will be done very shortly.
I would say that the bigger issue is the tennis and pickleball sign-ins, which are generally well below 50%. We've got to somehow change the character of the way the people are so that we can get better record keeping, because if we're going to do some long-range planning and we don't know how many people are using our facilities because they're not checking in, it hurts the people that are in those programs because the numbers won't show.
Piggybacking on that, I just want to reference something you said to me, Ken, as we walked in today. And that has to do with the fact that for a meeting like this, we need to check in because you're using the facilities. And and I have the feeling, I don't think I did it as much as I do now because I realize how important it is. I would come into a meeting like this and I would, use my key fob or whatever we had then. But I think it's really clear that it's really important, and I get that now. And you noticed that there were people who weren't checking in. I know I was one of those, but I get it now. So hopefully we can get the message out that it's really important to do so.
When I check in, whether it's tennis or pickleball, I check in in the same way. So it doesn't differentiate for me. That I'm aware of, unless you have an override.
Johan, sorry, Johan here. He has he's using a methodology to separate it, looking at court reserve and seeing where the names are. They're timed, so you know what time they come in and you can make sense out of it.
We're not supposed to be.
Well, let's finish up any other board member comments for Paul, and then if there's comments about Paul's, then I'll open it up to the floor. Okay, floor please. Dino?
Dino Lorisolo. This checking in is very, very, very critical. I know exactly what you guys are talking about.
Would you like to use the mic?
We can't hear.
You're just
I got a pretty big mouth, so.
do it, buddy.
This checking in is very, very important. And I don't know if the people from the community realize it. I only realized it about 120 days ago. Okay? What you're trying to do when you're trying to allocate funds and create a proper budget, when you have a committee trying to figure out how to generate a better interest for the community members and people that are going to be purchasing in this community, without data, true data, you're not only doing the improper, not only that you're having fiscal problems trying to get those that numbers together, but you may not get proper planning. I'm on the budget committee. We had our captain's meeting, and at that meeting, we tried to explain to everybody, please use your fob. If you didn't get the fob, go get it, blah, 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 blah. Let your people know. Unfortunately, people just don't understand, don't want to understand. At the several time slots that I attended this past week, which is the kickoff of the budget, we explained to people also, please make sure you check in, it's very important. I think that you may need to, because this is such an important thing, you may have to think outside the box or be a little bit more innovative. It may be something as simple as education, and it might be, this sounds as hard to believe, but you may need to put a yellow jacket or a vest on someone, pay them, stick them at that front entrance. Hello, good morning, good afternoon. What's your intention today? You're going to say, I'm going to play cards. Can you please sign in? I'm going to play bocce. Can you please sign in? If you can educate these people in different manners, again, it's going to cost, or it's going to be an inconvenience. That may work. The other thing that, or it may help, it's never going to work 100%. The other thing that I find is that these key fobs could be magic if it's properly implemented in each case. I don't know the expenses and who is if it's a software or hardware company that provides us the scanning and so forth. But if that was something that was on doors and there was signs that said, simple like if you went up to an area that had sanitizer, those things where you put your hand in and give sanitizer, if there's a box there that says, please scan for Najee, scan for Baji, scan for whatever it is, you're not going to get everybody. But you're going to begin to educate people and make people like myself all leave the house. Oh yeah, we have the passes. And one time we didn't, so we made sure we signed it because I became more aware it's very important. So you may really need to start thinking outside of the box. That is really, I think it is critical because that group's going to need that information. when you're budgeting to get even better than you guys are doing now, you're gonna need that information to know where to allocate those funds or where not to allocate funds. So you might have to keep in mind that it might be something that, it might be as simple as putting a guy at the desk or a person at the desk saying, hey, it's time for you guys, this is how it works now. This is
Part of it is we're trying to get the ladies that are at the front desk to at least mention when people come in, please sign in. But as you just said in passing, they're doing a lot of things. So we're finding that even when they want to do that, they're not always right there at that time. It's an open item. Those are good ideas.
Thanks, Steve. Rich?
One of the things in the tennis community is you can go to the tables without going through the area where Sandy and the girls are. So one thought might be that whoever the group leader is for the group has his list of who's playing that day. And when he asks, he takes a look at who their matches are, the group leader says, have you checked in? And until they've checked in, they can't go on the court.
You think your job's hard now?
Yeah.
Huh?
I said, you think that job's hard now?
No, it is, but it's a matter of, what the objective is. Yeah.
Welcome, Chuck McAllister.
Yeah, Chuck Mentor. I think one of the misconceptions are that if we come here in the morning, we check in. If we come again at noontime, do we still check in?
Yes.
If we come here at 6 o'clock tonight, do we still check in? We should be doing that each time.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, they need to understand that also at the front desk. Yeah.
Mark?
Dave, just a quick, this is a little, kind of a personal problem related to this. I have my fob, I keep it on my tennis bag. I check in every time. Now, when I come back here to go to a meeting, or get chewed out by Ken, something like that, I don't bring my tennis bag. Is there a way we could have,
Yes. Karen just did it.
Because of
With
Paul.
me.
Paul tried.
Paul has a solution?
So there is a solution, other than the gym, which will be corrected soon with the new reader that's going to be installed hopefully soon. Those readers have capability of, they say there's an app for everything, there is. So there's an app now on your cell phone where you can take a picture of your fob and it's on there. And then, so when you come, all you have to do is just hit the app that shows you all your fobs, and you hold up your phone, and you're checked in.
You're going to let us know.
Yeah, so we're going to get that information out the email very soon, to inform residents of that process.
That's it.
And therefore, you don't have to bring this anymore, you can leave it at home, because everybody has their phone generally with them, so that's all the problem.
It's called
Keyring.
key ring. Very easy to get. You take a picture of your card on it, and so and you can do it for anything.
Your CVS card.
Yeah. You can have a lot of different things, and it works. It's great.
You just took a picture.
It's great.
I had a question for Paul, Paige Giannetti Egrets. Paul, there still seems to be some confusion around who can use the facility when. And I just wondered if you could reissue the email that went out regarding renters, guests, all that, to try to get people used to some of the changes.
Paige, can you cite any specific examples that may have been brought to your attention or anything?
Yes, some of the renters, for example, they're still confused about if they're able to attend night, evening activities here, social. And then I've heard some guests that didn't really know if they could bring guests that were staying with them at their condo while they were there, or if they have guests that are using their condo but not renting it when they are not there in terms of the owners. So that's a couple of specific examples.
I'll get to you in a second, Jimmy. Somewhat related to that, I've had a couple people approach me, both residents and non-residents, and there may be a lack of clarity with the rules and regulations. To me, they're clear, but I think some people have been reading them and interpreting them in a different manner. A lot of what we did, the genesis for a lot of that was, we know we're landlocked. We have only so much land, and we have a lot of interest in a lot of different events. So part of the rules and regulations were before noon, if you have out-of-town guests visiting with you, they can come and play tennis, they can play bocce, they can play pickleball. But before noon, we never said that a guest can't come here accompanied by or meet with another owner to have a cup of coffee and sit around. And I've heard at least 2 examples of that have been brought to my attention, and I believe that was not the intention of the rules. So if I wanted to bring a friend who lives in Pine Ridge Estates over and have a cup of coffee with them in the morning under the tent or under the veranda over there, I should be able to do that, especially if they drive over to my house and they're not taking a parking spot. So with a little bit of logic, that's the way I read the rules and regulations. We're making the morning available to the owners so the owners can enjoy the facilities and the amenities. I don't know if there's any discussion from the board.
That's a perfect example, because somebody on the way here today said they can't meet their friends for coffee anymore in the lobby.
That's right.
Because their friends aren't allowed to come before noon if they don't live here in Pelican Marsh. So that was one of the examples. And then another one, there were probably 3 people that I would say got rather upset when I was checking in one day because they didn't understand the new guidelines or rules about when they could bring in their
It's all about parking.
Dave?
Yes.
I have a comment relating to check-ins. And with regard to not everybody understanding what they're supposed to do, perhaps another email can go out to the community. The question with regard to guests is confusing. So, as I interpret the rules, and as Jim just said, the issue really relates to parking, not necessarily how many people are on the tennis court or how many people are playing bocce or pickleball or just coming into the facility. What I would suggest as a policy is that non-residents can come in and can visit with their friends if the friends want to take them over to the community center, have a cup of coffee with them. But the person that comes in with the resident must either bicycle over so they don't take a parking space, or have the resident that they're coming with come into the community center with them, because that way you don't take up an extra parking space. I know it's difficult to enforce a lot of these rules, but these are the issues that are coming up, and we have to figure out a way to handle it.
I think that makes sense, that's reasonable. All right, any other comments here? I want to get to, if we're done with this subject, we want to go to Jim.
Jim.
Okay. Please, go ahead.
Okay. You turn on the microphone. Turn on the microphone.
Turn it on. Oh, boy. There you go. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jimmy Kleinman, and I've lived in Pelican Marsh since 1996. I lived in Ariel, and Lynn and I moved to Ventura in 2000. We have enjoyed, and we're like one of the people that Dave talked about that bought a second place in Pelican Marsh. We like the feel of Pelican Marsh and the community and the openness and the warmness of the community. We've made many, many very, very dear friends since we've been here. I want to say this politely to the board, since I've been here for a long time. I recognize that this board, over the last, and Jerry would know probably better than anyone since he's been on the board the longest, has been
quite dominated by the tennis community and the tennis players who are very vehement about parking and use and so forth and so on. And again, I'm just doing this as a preface to what I want to talk about. As we all know, there are bundled communities in the Naples area. When we moved here with WCI and so forth, Pelican Marsh was not marketed as a bundled tennis community. It was a residential community. Now, you can take that any way you want to look at it, but that's the way I see it, and I'm just giving you my opinion. Couple of things. I know it always comes back to parking, and I'm going to quote a couple people and then tell you why I'm saying this. No one knows more about guests and parking, as far as I'm concerned, than Johan. A direct quote from Johan is, "We do not have a guest problem at Pelican Marsh." So that's for the record. Secondly, Judy, who runs the classes, has said repeatedly, it's a rarity, if ever, that my classes are overcrowded. So I don't think we have a problem with that group, because I'm addressing specifically, my key points is, I'd like to have the board reconsider section B, number 9 of the rules and regulations concerning people not being allowed to be here between 8 and 12, Monday through Friday. Now, Paul said he has somebody looking and seeing there's nobody driving around looking for spaces. I think we need a much more significant and specific rule. Because I come here to play pickleball and I come here in the morning, I see 20 to 30 spaces. And maybe, like Jerry says, maybe in the month of March, it might be a little difficult. But I think if we're going to be a welcoming community, I think we need to think about these things. For example, I'm going to give you a couple specifics. I've been playing gin here for 15 years with about 8 guys. 3 of them lived in Pelican Marsh and moved out. Tiburon, whatever. And in fact is they both, all 3 of them belong to the country club so they can get into the gate. We were told by Paul or Patrick, you can't do this anymore. Now I still have, the room sits there on Thursdays. We play Tuesdays at the country club because they have a room. And Thursdays they say we can't play here. Now, one of the guys Doc had a stroke, he gets dropped off by his wife. Buddy gets dropped off. The other guy, Tony, gets dropped off. So all of a sudden, after 15 years, we're saying you can't play gin here anymore. And there's no, I disagree that there's a parking issue. There may be in the future, but I count the number of spaces available, not people driving around. And I think that we need to reconsider that. The same thing with my wife and these 3 young ladies in the front here next to where I was sitting. You know, they've had people that have been in Judy's class and come here in the off-season, I should say the off-season, not January, February, March, and they take her classes and they pay money, which is income to the foundation, which is important. They also, for example, another group that I think is affected by this rule adversely is what I call independent contractors, are the personal trainers and the people who do stretching and spa and so forth. A lot of the people, part of their practice, are people that don't live in Pelican Marsh, and they like to have massages in the morning, and they're precluded from doing this.
Jimmy, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up, because you should have a 3-minute limit. You're way over. Can you wrap it up, please?
Nope, that's done. Okay.
Maybe later on at resident comments we'll go back to it. Thank you for those comments, though.
Can I ask, just,
Can I have a point of order, please, folks? We've completely gone past.
We're a manager's
all the old
report,
business.
and that wasn't part of the manager's report.
The resident comments are on 11. We have not hit old business yet. And I'd like to get back on schedule, and then at the end, when we have resident comments, we can We can leave it
He
up.
was
We didn't know, we opened up to resident comments related to Paul's report, Paul's manager report, and we're wrapping that up. That was the last hand that I saw, so why don't we proceed now to old business? In old business, we have the long-range planning committee update. Paul?
Okay, so at last month's board meeting, the board approved the creation of a new long-term or long-range planning committee to research the future needs of the community for the benefit of its members. Since that meeting, we have sent out an email blast for recruitment members to serve on this committee. So far, we have received 10 members who are interested in serving on the committee. And if there's other members out there who still want to put their name in to serve, we need to receive their interests and bios by tomorrow, Friday the 17th, as that's the deadline for submittals. Once we get everybody's name in who's interested in serving, then our next step will be to select members to serve on the committee. So the goal is to have a committee that is diversified with backgrounds and skill sets that cover business, municipal planning, construction, development, marketing, real estate, and finance. All the candidates so far that have been turned in their interest and bios have very accomplished backgrounds, and I'm sure will be a very valuable asset to the committee. However, there's going to be only 6 openings to fill the committee. So for those who are not chosen, we hope that they would still be interested and involved in serving as maybe consultants or as a subcommittee to help that committee in the future then research information that's needed as we move down the road to gather information. Any questions? That's where we're at today.
I don't have any questions, Paul, but I would suggest if all these candidates are what we're expecting, yes, there's a limit to the numbers, but you can put these people in as alternate members on the committee, and when regular designated members don't show up, they can move into that position of voting, whatever is required. First, I just wouldn't turn them down. I put them there. We got good people. Let's work with them and not deny that opportunity of their experience.
I agree. I think that, I agree with that, Jim. I think that the goal, and Jim, Ken, and I visited with Paige and had conversations. We want this to be inclusive, so we can have subcommittees to the committee and include a lot of people. And I think that's how we're going to make that work. And we can also alternate in, just like you suggested.
Never deny volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a serious mistake. If you've got that many people that are interested in the subject matter that will help, you got to remember, out of those 10 people, they're not probably all full-time residents. That's the other issue. So, but, you know, the 6 number is an arbitrary number. But the reality of it is you get many people involved, especially an issue that's kind of broad spectrum. Okay, if you ask them what the long-range plan is, they haven't got a clue. They got to develop, okay, that from almost the get-go. So the more the merrier. And I think letting anybody off, okay, that's willing to operate within the confines of that committee should be let in.
Anything else from the board? I'm going to offer Paige a moment if she'd like to say something at this time. Paige is the chair of the committee.
I would just say that when I met with some of the members that are on the board, I was really pleased and excited with the stretch that they want us to have in the long-range planning process. So really thinking about the future 5 to 10 years out. So that was very encouraging to me. So I know that people who will be involved will be very supportive of that.
Thank you, Paige. Let's go on to 8.2. Jerry, would you like to talk about foundation employment of members?
Yeah. Last week, it surfaced that we have part of our documents allow for the employment of owners as foundation employees. The history that goes back is when Westinghouse started. That was one of the keynotes that Westinghouse implemented, was for a variety of reasons, security, privacy, etc., that no owner, okay, would be an employee of the foundation. They made one exception at the time because we already had a gentleman that was working before turnover, and that was Frank the Trooper. I don't know how many old people are here. Good, remember Frank? Okay. So we made an exception for Frank. That was the only exception. The next time the issue surfaced was we hired a new manager, and consequently what happened was the new manager's mother ended up with health difficulties, etc., and she was an owner of a residence and property here in Troon Lakes. She abandoned the property from a standpoint of ownership and went to a nursing home, whatever it was, and our manager then acquired that property and became a resident. Dave's not here, but we then took the issue to making an exception. That was Diane. That was the last exception. Somehow along the ranks and time frame, and I guess it was one of the 1 years that I wasn't on the board, we created the ability to have an owner serving as an employee.
Is this?
Okay.
Let me just add, Jerry, I'm afraid I'm going to respectfully have to correct you.
Mike, please.
I respectfully have to, no, good.
Bring it closer.
Stand closer, yeah.
Okay, how's this? No good? I'm speaking right in?
There you go.
There you go.
Right on.
I'll swallow. Okay. I have to disagree with Jerry. I knew this was going to be coming up this afternoon, and out of my own curiosity, I wanted to determine when this provision was put into our documents. I remember at the last meeting, we looked for it. I finally found it because I had some recollection that it was there. And the document that I was looking at that said that foundation can employ a resident as an employee is in our current declaration. Well, then I went back this afternoon and I looked to see when that original provision was put in. In 1993, WCI, in their original declaration and covenants, and as part of the bylaws, that's where it is, they have the exact same provision. So it's been there since 1993. I guess from time to time it's become an issue, but it isn't anything that was done specifically for one person or another. That's all I want to say. It's in there. And if you want to change it, certainly it's up to the board to discuss and determine whether or not they want to change
Well, but
it.
that's in the declarations, that would be more than the board.
Well, no, I'm wrong. It's the bylaws.
Okay.
And what you would need, if you want to amend the bylaws, is you have to have 14 days notice, do it at a meeting, and it's a board decision.
How about if we find out how the board feels, because it might not be a problem, it might be just Jerry's problem.
No, I happen to very much agree with Jerry in this issue. Let me show you what I'm thinking. First of all, you've got 1914 employers, if you please, to put it in a term that everyone probably at least understand or agree with. And if one employer is working for another employer, you set up the conflict. If I work for the foundation and I have a disagreement with the other owner, how is that owner going to say, well, this guy needs to be disciplined and removed? And it's just not a good situation to have to deal with. It's much cleaner if you simply say, if you're a resident, you don't work for the foundation. The other part is, do you extend that to contractors who come in here if they have a disagreement and they are also a resident? Is that set up an untenable situation? So you've got two pieces of this. Do you extend it to that? I don't have real strong feelings about it, but definitely, if you live here, you shouldn't work here for this foundation, because the person that we inherited through the system was a difficult individual, and it took a long time before that individual was removed from that position. And I believe we need to change the bylaws to reflect that if you live here, you don't work here.
Historical perspective.
Let's go to the board first.
Okay. The
Karen
reason,
or anybody else?
the original bylaws were created to allow residents to be, okay, employees, is because they were Westinghouse employees that were living here at the time, and that covered them. They were residents, and they were getting paid, okay, for doing work here at Pelican Marsh, AKA the foundation and Westinghouse were one and the same until turnover. So that's the coverage for them so that their own people could function.
I'd like to comment. I don't think you're ever going to write enough stuff in rules and regulations to cover common sense. So my sense of it is if you've got a person that lives in our community that for whatever reason wants to work part-time, is otherwise qualified maybe to fill in on a job or wants to work over in the tennis center for a while, and I think there's absolutely no reason why that person shouldn't be allowed to operate. Now, if someone lives in Pelican Marsh and happens to be a tennis pro or a fitness pro or an activities director, we might want to have a better understanding. If the person is really very qualified, I would think it would be a shame to say, I'm sorry that you can't be considered. You live in our community, you're a part of our community, and we can't hire you because we're liable to have a disagreement sometimes. So I think we need to use a little common sense. And I think to have a rule that all of a sudden cuts out any option for anyone living in the community to be involved with the foundation is too far-reaching.
A couple thoughts based on what Connie said. In terms of using some logic, the issue at best is a very low probability situation. Has it happened in the past? It has. But that being said, there are managers here, and the managers have job descriptions for those functions. And if those people are not performing properly, then they shouldn't work here. But why should an owner have some punitive behavior assessed against them because they live here? And if they want to pick up a little jingle jangle in their pocket working at the tennis courts, let them do it if they're good people and they want to do it. I'm not for that.
I think you're going to end up making a separation for each particular job. Let me tell you, you put somebody here and they get a job.
They only have 20 employees.
Huh?
It's not
They get a job, okay, to assist the administrative aide, okay? 2 clicks on that computer and she can tell you everything about an individual here that you want. There's a privacy issue, more now than even when this was created.
Is that correct? Paul, is that right? 2 clicks on the computer and she's going to know everything?
It all depends on what administrative authority we give to each employee. We have passwords on computers, so it all depends on the level of authority we give on the computer to the employee.
You got
So
450,000.
employees at the front desk, do they have that access?
The employees at the front desk have access to
The address book.
the address, where they live, but we don't have social security numbers and that kind of stuff.
We got credit card information.
Some of the owners do have credit card information on file to charge their services.
Historical precedent has been set on this subject. With Diana, a rather creative solution came up. Council drafted for us a confidentiality agreement, which ironically I think Jerry recommended for Diana. And the whole subject was set aside because she signed a confidentiality agreement. You can include whatever you want in there. Should be between that and Dave's point, supervisory excellence, we shouldn't have a problem. I have no more to say. Thank you.
Any comments, more comments from the board before we move on?
Well, again, I just think you're saying, well, we shouldn't have a problem. Look, you don't know and I don't know what can happen. If you don't allow them to work here, you never have to face that issue. because you don't have to worry about confidentiality, you don't have to worry about privacy, you don't have to worry about any of that. You came in here, you're an owner, you live here, you enjoy it, you don't work here. I mean, it's cut and dried and it's clean, and you don't have any potential problems in the future. Because who knows? The best person in the world, you think, oh, that's okay, let them come over here and work. And you turn around and they do some stuff that you never expected to happen. I said, why set yourself up? I can't go along with the idea of living here and working here.
I appreciate all the board members' comments, pro and con on this subject. We're going to move on to new business 9.1, design review committee.
Well, what are you going to do with this?
It's just going to remain old business.
Hold the committee, hold. See how you.
But we didn't post it for a vote, we can't vote.
No, we don't need to vote, but I'd like to know where Karen and Jeff and Ray stand. Is this something that we need to keep talking about? Or are we comfortable with where we are?
I'm satisfied with the current language.
I think the problem that Jim is addressing, an owner being here and maybe some conflict of interest or invasion of privacy could exist with an outside employee just as easily, and they can utilize the information for their own personal benefit.
Yes, I have
no problem with the, I don't have a problem with an owner working there as an employee if they're qualified or supervised, and they get fired just as fast as anybody else if they're not doing the job or if there's any improvement.
Good point, thank you.
I agree. Thought about it. And we currently have more than one person who's a resident here who is working. And we would then enter the area of, are we going to then grandfather those people in, and for how long? Are we going to fire them on the spot if the rule gets changed? You know, it will be a very complicated issue because we do have current employees who.
Okay, so it's sort of 5-2 here on this, so I think we're just going to move on to 9.1 because this is not a subject of the vote. Design review, please.
Make this short, there are new applications sent in this month for review for approval, so.
Okay, good, I haven't seen it there, okay, great. Let's go back to board member comments. I open it up to the board for any comments.
You want to go down around?
All right, Karen, would you like to start?
I have no comment.
Okay, Jim?
No comment.
Jerry?
Just one comment. Jim, this was not, created by Westinghouse as a tennis-oriented community. This was a golf course community. Their selling feature, their advertising, all pinpointed the golf.
But it wasn't bundled.
It wasn't bundled.
There's a big difference, Jerry.
No, they never
It's a
issued.
private club.
Yeah, exactly, but
It's a big difference in a bundled community, which Esplanade is, and Stony Brook, and so there's a different community. They might have sold it as a golf community, but the big difference between what you're talking about and a bundled community.
no. What you related to, though, was the fact that the tennis situation.
It's not a tennis bundled community either.
The tennis situation, and you're right, I've been on the board. I was the only non-tennis player for 15 out of the 18 or 19 years, okay? But you stated that tennis was the paramount issue here, and it wasn't, golf was. If you didn't have the golf course here, the value of this property would be a third less.
I was talking about control and how to
So-
parking and make another decision.
Yeah.
Time for some other board members.
I have no comment.
Great. Okay.
I do. Thank you, Jim. And I don't want you to think that I was upset with what you said, because I agree with a lot of what you said. My problem was, this is a board meeting, and we really should hold member comments to the end to ensure that the board covers all of its.
They would recognize it.
I understand that, and that would. there's a number of very good comments people have made, yourself included, regarding common sense, and Dave said it. We had to do something because of the parking situation. And so that's the reason for the restriction. But common sense says if a friend drives to your house, gets in your car, and comes here, nobody's going to say, I'm sorry, you can't come into this building.
They did.
They did. They did.
They came to the gym and say, you guys have to get out of here.
Yes.
They were drinking coffee, he came in and said, you cannot.
Who said
be
that?
here.
Patrick.
You must leave now.
Were the people in the gym?
No,
they
just sitting.
Yes.
And they came in the gym game and said, you guys can't play.
Okay, but see,
Well, gym game.
we didn't know their transportation motives to get to the community center. We're just going by what the new rules say. Basically, if you're a local guest coming in the community for the day to visit your friend and play tennis or whatever, the rule states that you can't be here up until noon. Now, we made some good comments about, well, what they're not going to drive a car, they're going to drive over me. That makes sense. So we could maybe need to modify the rules a little bit.
Well, actually, our friends walked, so.
Well, I think we all need to use some common sense with it, and I apologize that somebody came in, and I think the world of Patrick, by the way. I think he's done a great job, and he's trying, we're all trying to figure out a way around. So I have a suggestion. My suggestion is, for those people that have groups that want to meet in the morning, put a list together, approach Dave and Paul and say, we will make arrangements so that this will not impact parking, and can we get an accommodation to allow us not to interrupt something we've been doing for 20 years. But we cannot have people driving in here. This year is important to us. We're measuring with PFOBs, we're measuring the empty spaces. We need to do the best we can to live within the constraints that we have to try to determine where the issues lie. Everybody said with pickleball we're going to have no spaces and people are going to have to drive around. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I know we have pickleball players that are coming and everybody seems to have enough place to park, but we're not into season yet. So just be aware, if you have something that you think is important to continue and you understand that it is completely against the rules and regulations based upon the way they're set, everybody here has a brain. Why don't you put together a note with a list and say, if we did this, can we get an exception? And the key is, if it doesn't impact parking, if there's any chance that somebody's going to come in here, then we're going to have to crack down.
I said I had no comment, but I'm sorry, I've got to say that I do have a comment, and based on what you just said. I understand if someone wants to come in, they're not driving, to come in with a resident, and they sit down, they have coffee, but they don't use any of the facilities. I have no problem if Jim's friends want to come in and play cards. They're not really taking up any extra space so long as they don't drive into the community center. But what about the people that want to come in and exercise? Let's say they ride a bike to the community, but they no longer live in the community. What are we going to do with them? I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed. I'm just saying these are questions that are going to come up, and we're not resolving that issue now. We're still leaving it open.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple comments still.
I think this young lady about her resident comment.
Glenn, if you could wait a little bit, I'd like to I'll open it up to residents and I want to give Jimmy more time. I just want everyone to be thoughtful. You know, Lynn put out a nice email about January is the extra nice month and all that. And I really like to see that as opposed to seeing mid-70-year-olds swinging at each other at Pelican Marsh, or, inappropriate language being exchanged with each other. So, I mean, bottom line is sooner or later, it's gonna come back and it's gonna bite them in their hind end with a suspension. And do we wanna do that? No, we don't wanna do that. But if they do something inappropriate to an owner or staff, that judgment will come. So that's all I'm saying. And then lastly, it just cracks me up. The rumor mill around here is hilarious. I was told by a resident that, not that this is important, but it's just typical of the stuff that I and others hear, that I was the deciding vote on the rules and regulations that prohibited people from coming to Pelican Marsh before noon. When in fact, if we now record all these, they're on the internet, they're on our webpage and all, that was passed in October by a vote of 6-1. So it wasn't even close. But again, it's just the rumor du jour of the moment. So those are my comments. With that, I open it up to resident comments.
Why don't we let Jimmy go first, because we cut him off.
That's right, can I come with the boss?
Go ahead. If you'd like to use the microphone, maybe.
No, I don't use microphones.
Okay, well,
Can you walk here?
it's hard.
This is for the tape two for people watching at home later on. Thank you.
So what's your P's and Q's?
Okay, I'll make this very quick.
Close to the mic.
I'll make this very
Identify
quick.
yourself, please.
I'll make this very quick. Is that better?
Much.
My dear friends, two of my dear friends who lived here for many years and now do not live here. I just want to make sure I have this correct, because I don't want to be passing around misinformation, rumors. They are not allowed to come here in the morning and take a class, even though they pay for that. They are not allowed to come here and have a massage, even though they pay for that. They're not allowed to come here and work with a personal trainer, even though they pay for that. But they are allowed, if they don't drive, to come here in the morning and visit while they're out walking or something, as long as they don't drive. Is that correct?
That's how I read it. I think so. In other words, they can do all those things that you said they can't do. They just have to do it after 12 o'clock.
Correct.
And is that just in season?
So January through March. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you, that's important. So April through December, they are allowed to take a class, get a massage, et cetera, anytime. Okay.
I want to be sure that I understand what you just said. I think I agree with you. So we're talking primarily January through March, non-residents, no driving, they can come in, they can have coffee, they can walk around, they can do what they want, but they can't use any of the facilities to the extent the exercise room, the workout room, stuff like that.
Or the tennis,
Any of the facilities, tennis or bocce or pickleball.
Okay.
Is that what you said?
Yes, I mean, that's my understanding of the rule. However, in a way that doesn't make sense to me, because if they're not driving, they're not taking up a parking space.
But they're taking up an opportunity for an owner who may want to play pickleball.
Unfortunately, it
tennis,
isn't just parking. For example, when we took away one of the tennis courts to put in pickleball, we put more pressure on those people that play tennis. And so we said we have to accept the fact that in the morning, from January through March, we have to make sure that those constrained facilities are not used by guests. So that's why you can't go into the fitness center even though you're paying. That's why you can't use anything where there's a constraint.
Well, but that doesn't apply to massage.
Well, it does if it's somewhat, yeah.
They have plenty of time. If you ask any Kate or any of the girls that do massage,
We can't bear with us for a season till we figure out where we are. We're doing the best we can, and some people will be unhappy, and some people will feel as though they're silly, but quite frankly, this is the rules. And I'm just saying, if you want to visit with someone where you're not using that and they come in and there's no parking issue, it should be okay.
I just want to say one more thing real quickly. So if this is sort of a test time where you're measuring and determining
Yes.
these things,
Yes.
so would I gather from that that it might be a possibility that it would change at some point, like for next year?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I'm going off the board in March, but my understanding is that we're trying to limit any kind of change between now and let's say mid-April or so we can have a bunch of data points and we can understand it. And then assessments can be made, and if things need to be tweaked, the board can do that.
Understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
I would like to make a clarification based on what's been discussed. Jimmy, when we started this conversation, I said, you play cards here, as long as your friends don't take up a parking space, they can play cards with you. That's what I said. Am I right or am I wrong? Someone tell me, what is the policy? Yeah, that's what I said, but I want to make sure that it's consistent with the policy that the board just set.
No.
Okay.
I'm gonna jump in there just.
Yeah, the other question, candidly, is... Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go shoot.
I think we all thank you very much for your input, and Jimmy, very much appreciated. I think what we're going through this year, and everyone recognizes it, but they all got to take a moment when there's a conflict or a problem and take a breath, think about it. We're going through a transitional period this year, we really are, with the key fobs, and placing them in different areas and getting people to learn how to operate them and get consistent in using the key fobs. We got a parking issue, which has been addressed by you and the board. There's a lot of things going on here that we're trying to adapt to make this a better community for the benefit of over 3,400 homeowners. And the homeowners are the ones who have first recognition to the amenities that are being offered, particularly from January through March. And there seems to be a little issue here with guests here and getting them to be able to use those amenities. I think the board has addressed this as in the best way they can through the rules. A lot of discussions over the months. And again, just take a pause, take a breath. I had a recent incident where I got upset and I had a choice. Grab my bottle of bourbon and go into a stupor, or go to the fitness center and work myself into a sweat. I choose the healthy one.
Yeah, I mean, we don't share with the drinking part.
I think we gotta do that. We just gotta take a breath. It will work out, and I think everyone will be pleased with the way we go forward for the benefit of everyone in this group.
Okay.
Ray, just one thing, backing on Ray. The actual rule, Jimmy, Karen, Jimmy, nice to meet you, that you cited ends with, which is B9, ends with, however, the board may expand or further limit guest use of the facilities depending on member demand. And I think that speaks to what you said, is that we really, and also what Ray is saying now, that we're just looking at this. We're just trying to make Pelican Marsh the best possible place we can. And parking is possibly an issue. I think the only thing I take is yoga. And yoga's extremely popular, and that room is very, very, very crowded at all times. And I don't know if no guests are making it better, but I think this is the kind of thing that Paul is doing in terms of gathering data. And I think data is what we're going to work on, and we will revisit this at the end of season and see what we think.
Dan,
But we take what you say and member input seriously.
Okay.
We try to listen.
Could I ask that the people who are working here on any given day understand and know these things so that...
We all need to know it, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Chuck?
Yeah, these few people that want to come here in the early morning hours, parking's an issue, we all understand that. Why not allow these few people to come? Hey, we get the monies, we get the revenue from them coming, and we have them park over here against the wall.
Because we can't tell them to do that.
No one wants to do that.
This actually falls into the data collecting. This falls into the data collecting you were talking about. This gentleman had mentioned something earlier. You said, every time you come here, you have to do this. Collection is one thing, but accurate data is really important. And I think that we want to make sure that just scanning doesn't skew the information that the board is receiving or the committee is receiving. We're going to have to figure out a way to make sure that this information, it's not just 1,000 SKUs are coming through. We're assuming that it's 10 parking cards. We have to figure out a way to actually break that down so that you can get more accurate information so that you can make everything work more cohesively. Because I heard that, if I come up here for a coffee, I have to use the building. If I come up here for this, I'm going to use it. It's great, I understand it, but make sure it doesn't skew your numbers, because then you're going to be way deeper. You may not be making the best decisions with the information you're given to you.
Thank you. I don't see any hands up, so, okay, please.
I have one quick
Can you
question.
please introduce yourself?
Since parking is such an issue, and excuse my ignorance, but if parking is our main problem, I'm hearing parking. Is there any solution for the parking? Can we get more parking? Is there space for more parking?
Where have you been?
Our goal is that Paige has white hair by the time she finishes this study.
Yeah, can we build a parking structure to solve this problem? Is that outrageous?
It's not outrageous, I don't know if it's necessary, we need to get more metrics.
That's why we have a long-range planning committee that's looking at the needs of the community, what we need to do to be competitive, what the facilities need to be. We have a subgroup under Mark that's looking at the beginning of some food service. There's a lot of stuff going on, and parking is invariably the issue. It's invariably the issue.
I think you can summarize how many spots have we created in...
20.
How many?
20.
20 new spots have been created over the...
Last year.
Over last year.
So it's being
addressed.
As a financial guy, I would tell you that's well over 20%.
Thank you, Ken. And parking garage has in the past been discussed with a $3 or $4 million.
I said three.
$4 million price tag as a summary. But that doesn't, what it means is, yes, it's been talked about, and yes, it will continue to be looked at as a possible solution.
I don't know if we need a parking structure like they have on Fifth Avenue. We just need more parking, more than 20 spots. It seems to me from what I'm...
Well, honestly, we don't know whether we do or not. That's why we're collecting data.
Well, whatever.
In the back, sir? Oh, hey, Rocco.
In the past, has anybody considered the possibility, and this is looking at the parking problem we have, of instituting some form of bus service in the mornings with specific times to pick up people, have it run around twice, and then once the tennis players and whoever is going to the center are in place, and it just continues running around. At noon, we get rid of it because there's always parking spaces.
It has been talked at the board level over the last couple of years, that subject, and the price tag on it wasn't, the cost benefit on it just didn't play out. But it's something that, again, right now, we haven't had a parking problem. A couple of years ago we did. But, it may show up, then it may not, we're hoping it doesn't.
What I'm getting at, though, is in the long-term planning. It's a motor vehicle.
It's a good idea, yeah, it's one of the ideas you throw against the wall and see if it sticks. Nathaniel?
I'll be quick. The board and the community recently has made a couple changes to both increase and decrease demand at the same time. Like adding pickleball, but add more people here, adding parking spots, loosens it up. And I've noticed from on the ground that decreasing visitors in the morning has solved what I thought was going to be a big issue for both of them. On the tennis courts, we now have one less tennis court than before, so I thought it was going to be really bad trying to get a tennis court, which the prime spots for tennis is 8 a.m. and 9:30. If you look at the scheduling, 100% of those spots get booked a week from now. In fact, I checked in advance. 100% of all spots at 8 o'clock and 9:30 are always booked. That's with 0 visitors. And the parking lot is got parking. Right now, we're still having empty parking spots thanks to those two things, the 20 extra spots and the 0 visitors. It may turn out that if we needed a $4 million parking garage, we only needed it 2 hours a day. Because we have 3 visitors during those 2 hours, you know?
Thank you.
You know, and they say no visitors, and boom, the problem goes away. But of course, everybody wants to say, oh, but my visitors are wonderful, and I'd like to have it. My suggestion to the board, though, would be that maybe even sooner than we want to, that we look at all our different resources and recognize that some of them are very limited resources, such as playing tennis at 8 a.m. and 9:30. They're very limited because they're already 100% booked with 0 visitors. But then certain other resources might be in great supply. And I haven't researched how many bookings are open to this type of contractor or that type of contractor. But I do feel, and I know Paul feels the same way, I do feel a little bad, and Patrick also feels this way, he expressed this, if our rule is a wide brush that sweeps away some income from a contractor who doesn't make that much money anyway, providing a service. And so I feel a little bad if there is a service that he or she is providing that is not limited. We see that their class is always half full or something, that maybe we consider re-looking at the not limited resources before we look at the limited ones. Does that make sense? Before we say, okay, we need to just decrease the visitors anytime, maybe not everything is of equal value or demand. That's what I mean.
Thank you. Hearing no other business before the board, I look for a motion for adjournment.
I so moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody, for participating and joining us.
Want to introduce me?